In the cradle of civilization long before Alexander the Great or Julius Caesar, kings ruled city-states on the fertile plains between the Tigris and Euphrates. Their names echo through clay tablets and legends. Gilgamesh, Sargon, Hammurabi, Nebuchadnezzar, Ashurbanipal, Ur-Nammu, Naram-Sin, Tiglath-Pileser, Shulgi, and Cyrus. How did these men seize power? What did they build or destroy? Why do their stories still captivate us? Welcome to a journey across 4,000 years from Sumer's mud-brick cities to Persia's vast empire. Settle in for 40 minutes of history, myth, and monumental ambition. Gilgamesh of Uruk. What if the world's first epic hero was also a real king who ruled a city and built walls that still appear in clay records? Gilgamesh is famous from the Epic of Gilgamesh, a tale of friendship, gods, and the search for immortality. Yet tablets and inscriptions suggest he was also a historical king of Uruk during the early dynastic period, around 2800 to 2500 BC. The Sumerian king list names him as the fifth ruler after the flood and credits him with 126 years on the throne. His father was said to be a king and his mother a goddess. Myth and reality are intertwined. As king, Gilgamesh is credited with colossal civic projects. The Tamil inscription praises him for rebuilding the walls of Uruk and the temple of Enlil. In one fragmentary epic, his own people rebelled against his harshness. Yet he remained a mighty ruler who led Uruk to wars and victories. Another clay tablet recounts that after Gilgamesh died, his body was buried beneath the Euphrates. The river was temporarily diverted to create a dry grave and then allowed to flow back over his tomb. Such feats required organization and engineering unheard of in earlier times. Gilgamesh's fame endured because later kings revered him. During the third dynasty of rulers, adopted Gilgamesh as a divine brother and worshipped him. The epic itself, while mythological, reflects concerns of real kings. The tension between heroism and mortality, the need to establish justice and infrastructure, and the fear of being forgotten. His heroic journey with Enkidu and encounters with the gods have inspired literature for millennia, but his historical legacy is the transformation of Uruk from a loose collection of villages into a walled metropolis. The story of Gilgamesh sets the tone for our series. Kings were not merely rulers, but myth-makers, and with his walls still echoing in legend, we move from Uruk to Akkad, where another ruler would redefine kingship. Imagine Sargon of Akkad, a foundling cast upon a river, rising to conquer all of Mesopotamia and create the world's first empire. According to legend, Sargon's mother was an Akkadian priestess who bore him in secret. She set him adrift in a basket on the Euphrates. A gardener or laborer found the child and raised him. The goddess Ishtar favored him, and he eventually became the cupbearer of the king of Kish. But Sargon was ambitious. Around 2330 BC, he overthrew his lord and captured Lugal-Zaggisi of Umar, proclaiming himself king of Kish. On clay tablets, he boasted of triumphing in 34 battles and washing his weapons in the sea. Sargon established a new capital, Akkad, whose location remains a mystery. He dispatched Akkadian governors to rule the Sumerian city-states, tore down their defensive walls, and promoted trade and commerce across his empire by adopting Akkadian as the official language. Sargon fostered administrative unity and cultural exchange. His rule lasted more than half a century, and he founded a dynasty that continued through his grandson, Naram-Sin. Sargon's popularity lies in his pioneering vision. He turned a patchwork of rival cities into a centralized state that stretched from the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf. Legends call him the first true king. He built infrastructure, including canals that improved irrigation and trade, and he claimed divine favor as the chosen of Ishtar. Sargon's success set a precedent for later emperors, and his stories inspired the Bible's account of Moses floating in a basket. Sargon shows that humble origins need not limit ambition. His empire would inspire later kings, yet even the greatest lawgivers must contend with justice. This brings us to Hammurabi. Hammurabi of Babylon. What if the key to governing a vast and diverse realm is to carve your laws in stone? Hammurabi rose to the throne of Babylon around 1792 BC. Unlike Sargon's mythical birth, his succession was orderly. He inherited the city-state from his father and set out to make Babylon the dominant power. Hammurabi is best known for the Code of Hammurabi, a stele inscribed with 282 case laws covering economic, family, criminal, and civil matters. Carved on black diorite, the laws dealt with everything from trade contracts to physicians' fees and set punishments based on social status. The preface asserts that Hammurabi was chosen by the gods to make justice prevail in the land and destroy the wicked. But Hammurabi was also a shrewd conqueror. In his 30th year, he turned south, conquering Lassa and Mari, thus uniting all of southern Mesopotamia under Babylonian rule and shifting the center of power from Sumer to Babylon. He allied with and later defeated the kingdom of Eshna and the Elamites. Throughout his reign, he built and restored temples and defensive walls, dug canals to irrigate fields and supply his capital, and waged wars to secure trade routes. Hammurabi's popularity stems from the juxtaposition of conquest and codification. His law code, one of the most comprehensive collections from antiquity, influenced legal thinking for millennia. Yet, he did not see law and war as opposites. He used law to legitimize expansion, claiming to protect the weak and uphold divine order, even while subjugating rivals. The stele was placed in public spaces while harsh by modern standards. The code sought consistency in judgment and offered remedies for injured parties. Hammurabi's laws codified the idea that kings had a duty to justice, not just conquest. Yet some kings are remembered not for their laws, but for their colossal monuments. Enter Nebuchadnezzar II. Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon is a ruler remembered for conquering kingdoms or for creating legendary gardens and glittering gates. Nebuchadnezzar II reigned over the Neo-Babylonian Empire from 605 to 562 BC. He is infamous in the Hebrew Bible for besieging Jerusalem in 587 BC, destroying the kingdom of Judah, deporting much of its population, and beginning the Babylonian exile. His conquests also included the wealthy cities of Tyre and others along the Levantine coast, restoring Babylon's fortunes. But Nebuchadnezzar's legacy is built in bricks and glazed tiles. He embarked on an unprecedented building program, reconstructing the Esagala temple dedicated to Marduk and the towering ziggurat. He widened and paved the processional way, lined it with lion reliefs, and led processions to the Ishtar Gate, an enormous entrance adorned with shimmering blue tiles and images of dragons and bulls. In later accounts, he is credited with constructing the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders, perhaps as a gift for his Median wife. Though archaeologists debate the garden's existence, the legend reflects his reputation as a builder of marvels. Nebuchadnezzar also fortified Babylon with double walls and reinforced canals. He promoted commerce and religious festivals, making Babylon a cosmopolitan hub. Yet, he demanded loyalty. When Judah rebelled, he responded with devastation. The exile changed Jewish history and inspired prophetic literature. In Mesopotamia, however, he was hailed as Marduk's champion who restored the city's grandeur. Nebuchadnezzar's story combines brutality and beauty. He left ruined cities and dazzling gates. As we turn to our next king, a man who collected texts instead of bricks, take a moment to consider whether you're enjoying this journey through ancient history. If so, please drop a like and subscribe. It helps us share more stories like these. Ashurbanipal, scholar of Nineveh. What happens when a warrior king becomes the world's first librarian? Ashurbanipal ruled Assyria from 669 to 631 BC. He is remembered for his military campaigns against Egypt and Elam, but also for something unprecedented. He was literate. Unlike many rulers, Ashurbanipal could read and write Ardean and Sumerian. He mastered divination texts and boasted of his knowledge. Recognizing the power of information, he ordered scribes and soldiers to collect tablets from across Mesopotamia. Letters preserved at Nineveh show him writing to Babylonian cities, requesting copies of every text they possessed. He threatened those who refused. The result was the library of Ashurbanipal, containing some 30,000 clay tablets and fragments. Its shelves held legislation, royal correspondence, financial records, omen collections, medical treatises, astronomical observations, dictionaries, and epics, including the oldest known copies of the Epic of Gilgamesh. To stock his library, Ashurbanipal used war booty. Scribes traveled with armies to seize archives from defeated cities. Ashurbanipal's personal education influenced his rule. He continued Assyrian traditions of conquest, but also styled himself as a priest-king who could interpret omens and consult ancient wisdom. His library preserved texts that would have been lost when Nineveh fell. The royal storms uncovered in the 19th century revolutionized Assyriogology. Our knowledge of Mesopotamian literature owes much to this scholar king. At the height of his reign, Ashurbanipal boasted of flaying rebels and lining city walls with their skin, a reminder that literacy did not temper Assyrian brutality, but he believed written knowledge anchored divine authority. In collecting and cataloging the past, he ensured his own legacy. If you're enjoying this exploration of ancient kings and their achievements, we hope you'll like and subscribe so more viewers can join us. Let's continue to another lawgiver who built colossal temples, Ur-Nammu of Ur. Could the world's earliest law code arise from a king renowned for building roads and ziggurats? Around 2112 BC, Ur-Nammu established the third dynasty of Ur. After expelling the Gutians from Sumer, holding the titles King of Sumer and Akkad, he built the core of a new empire. Ur-Nammu's reign restored order. He dug canals, built roads, founded cities, and commissioned temples. He's credited with constructing the great ziggurat of Ur, a towering platform of mud brick dedicated to the moon god Nana. Other ziggurats across Mesopotamia followed his model, but his most enduring contribution is the Code of Ur-Nammu, the oldest known law code written in Sumerian. Only fragments survive, but they reveal fines and compensations rather than the lex talionis, an eye for an eye. In a prologue, Ur-Nammu boasts that he eliminated enmity, violence, and cries for justice. The code speaks of widows, orphans, and free women, showing concern for vulnerable groups. Ur-Nammu's laws and building projects helped unify the region after decades of instability. Roads and canals facilitated trade and communication. His legal reforms standardized penalties and responsibilities. As a pious king, he dedicated temples to various gods and credited divine favor for his success. After Ur-Nammu's death in battle, his son Shulgi inherited a strong, centralized kingdom. Ur-Nammu's combination of public works and legal innovation set the stage for his son's remarkable reign. Let's meet Shulgi's more infamous grandson, the first to call himself a god, Naram-Sin of Akkad. What happens when a king declares himself divine and claims dominion over the entire world? Naram-Sin, grandson of Sargon, ascended the throne of Akkad around 2254 BC. During his reign, he faced rebellions and invasions, yet emerged victorious. After crushing his enemies, he adopted the titles King of the Four Corners of the World and Living God. An inscription records that his citizenry, impressed by his victories, begged him to do so. The title signaled universal sovereignty and unprecedented divinity for a Mesopotamian ruler. Naram-Sin expanded the empire's borders into western Iran and northern Syria, campaigning against the Luloi and kings of Ebla. He erected a victory stele, showing him wearing a horned helmet symbol of divinity, while scaling a mountain littered with defeated foes. The stele is one of the earliest artworks depicting a king as god. Naram-Sin also standardized administration. He reformed accounting systems, established provincial governors, and appointed his daughters as high priestesses to cement the cult of Inanna and other deities. Yet his divine claims sparked controversy. Later scribes blamed him for the empire's collapse, saying his hubris offended the gods. A famous omen text portrays him consulting oracles before attacking a sacred city and being punished. Whether true or retrospective propaganda, these stories remind us of the precarious balance between divine kingship and piety. Naram-Sin pushed kingship into the realm of the divine, but later, Assyrian kings would perfect the machinery of empire through ruthless reforms and social engineering. One stands out: Tiglath-Pileser III. Tiglath-Pileser III. Can a king turn a seasonal militia into a professional war machine and reshuffle his provinces to crush dissent? When Tiglath-Pileser III seized the Assyrian throne in 745 BC, the empire was fracturing. He responded with sweeping reforms. To break the power of regional magnates, he divided large provinces into smaller districts under royal governors and restricted the right to commission inscriptions, sometimes even erasing the names of rebellious officials. Centralizing the bureaucracy enhanced control and prevented governors from amassing independent armies. Tiglath-Pileser then transformed the Assyrian military. Previously, the army consisted of seasonal conscripts called up after harvest. Under his rule, it became a professional standing force with a specialized Kids Shah King's unit of trained soldiers. He introduced iron weapons, new siege engines, and units of cavalry and chariots. He also recruited soldiers from conquered regions and hired mercenaries from Babylonia, the Zagros Mountains, and Anatolia. Revenues flowed into maintaining this army and developing outlying provinces rather than lavish projects in Assyria's heartland. Perhaps most controversial were his mass deportations. Unlike earlier resettlements, Tiglath-Pileser deported tens or hundreds of thousands systematically to reduce local identities and repopulate underdeveloped areas. He aimed to prevent rebellion and supply laborers, moving whole communities, but ensuring their safety and using them as economic assets. These policies foreshadowed later imperial strategies across the Near East. On the battlefield, Tiglath-Pileser conquered vast territories, Babylon, parts of Syria, and the Levant. He promoted himself as the chosen of the gods and launched propaganda campaigns celebrating his victories. His reforms laid the groundwork for the Neo-Assyrian Empire. By professionalizing the army and re-engineering society, Tiglath-Pileser forged an empire that would dominate the Near East. Yet not all kings ruled through fear. Some, like Shulgi, promoted literature and called themselves scholars. Shulgi of Ur. What if a king could read, write, compose hymns, play music, and still command armies? Shulgi succeeded his father Ur-Nammu on the throne of around 294 BC. He ruled for nearly half a century and left a legacy of reforms and cultural patronage. One of his first acts was to complete his father's great ziggurat and expand temples. He erected the Wall of the Land, a defensive barrier across Mesopotamia to repel Amorite and Elamite incursions. To pay for its garrisons, he taxed temple estates, intertwining religious and military finances. Shulgi portrayed himself as a polymath. Court hymns claim he could solve mathematics, compose music, and speak multiple languages. He reformed the scribal curriculum, standardizing Sumerian literature and promoting royal hymns. According to one inscription, he declared himself a god, the first such claim since Naram-Sin. This deification helped legitimize his authority and perhaps reinforce loyalty among subjects accustomed to divine kings. Economically, Shulgi expanded trade across the Near East. He refurbished and built new temples, linking his reign to piety, and undertook military campaigns to maintain control over Sumer and Akkad. His legal and administrative reforms streamlined taxation and record-keeping. By sponsoring literature, he ensured that Sumerian hymns, epics, and proverbs were copied and preserved. Some scholars regard him as the first ruler to create a state-sponsored curriculum. Shulgi's blend of war, literature, and self-deification marks him as one of the most complex kings in Mesopotamian history. As we approach the end of our journey, we meet a conqueror renowned not for cruelty, but for compassion, Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great. How did an emperor conquer the world's greatest city without a fight and then issue a declaration of human rights? Cyrus II, later called Cyrus the Great, founded the Achaemenid Persian Empire in the mid-6th century BC. After conquering Media and Lydia, he turned his sights on Babylon. In 539 BC, the Babylonians opened their gates to him. He entered in peace amidst joy and jubilation. Unlike many conquerors, Cyrus ordered that the city not be pillaged. He returned statues of gods that had been seized in earlier wars and publicly worshipped Marduk to legitimate his rule. Cyrus is famous for freeing the Jews who had been deported by Nebuchadnezzar. He allowed them to return to Judah and rebuild their temple. The Cyrus cylinder, a baked clay barrel discovered in Babylon, records how he restored temples and repatriated displaced peoples. It proclaims freedom of religion and the right of communities to return home. Modern scholars often call the cylinder the world's first charter of human rights. Cyrus used these policies of tolerance and respect to stabilize his empire. He sought to present himself as a liberator rather than an oppressor. Cyrus built the capital at Pasargadae, where terrace gardens and palaces blended Persian and Mesopotamian styles. He created a system of satrapies, provinces governed by local elites under Persian oversight. His reforms allowed diverse cultures to coexist under imperial administration. Cyrus died in battle around 530 BC and was buried in a modest tomb. His empire was expanded by successors such as Cambyses and Darius, but his founding vision of pluralism endured. Cyrus's unusual combination of military prowess and tolerance made him an icon across cultures, from the Hebrew Bible to Greek historians. From the walls of Uruk to the gates of Babylon, from the ziggurats of Ur to the palaces of Persia. These kings shaped human history. Gilgamesh taught us about mortality. Sargon united Mesopotamia. Hammurabi codified laws. Nebuchadnezzar built wonders. Ashurbanipal preserved knowledge. Ur-Nammu and Shulgi established justice and scholarship. Naram-Sin and Tiglath-Pileser pushed the limits of kingship. And Cyrus showed that power can be tempered with mercy. Their stories are carved on stone, pressed into clay, and whispered in epics. Which king impressed you the most? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey through ancient Mesopotamia, please subscribe for more history unfolded.